saved a life? We use that term so casually. I forgot my wallet. Can you lend me $10? Oh, you saved my life. Or I can't pick my kids up from school today. Could you get them for me? Oh, you're such a lifesaver. We just kind of throw it around. But have you ever really saved a life? Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone and thought, you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for something that I did? Back in 1999, I was working in television news. It wasn't the glamorous side of news. That wasn't really what I wanted to do. It was the back of the house kind of things. I got to go out on stories and field produce, and sometimes I'd get to edit, and sometimes I'd get to run the assignment desk and send crews out on breaking news stories. But my favorite thing to do was to read the wires and look for interesting stories that I could bring to the producer in the hopes that she would let me write something for the news that night. And I started noticing an interesting trend, that there were stories from different states about something called safe haven laws. And I wasn't quite sure what that was. So I did some research, and safe haven laws are laws that allow women to legally leave newborns at hospitals, fire stations, police stations with, no cause, no questions. They can just walk away. Now, I couldn't understand how somebody could do that. I was a mom, I had 2 kids, and I didn't really get why someone would need a law like this. But I also found that in Nevada, we didn't have these kinds of laws. So I started doing a little bit more research. And I found that a few years before that, there had been a horrible story in rural Nevada, in Winnemucca. There was a teenage girl that had gotten pregnant, had given birth, and she and 2 boys went out in the desert, and they took the baby right after it was born. And they drove over his head twice. I couldn't understand. And then a few years later, there was another incident where there was a Nellis airman. She was 26 years old. She was an adult. She gave birth in her bedroom, and she suffocated the baby in a hamper. She said she didn't know she was pregnant. And sometimes you just have to stop and think, what drives people to do these kinds of things? Now, I have a confession to make. I'm that person with those crazy ideas, big crazy ideas. Not the, hey, let's go to LA and go to the beach for the weekend crazy ideas. No, that's not me. I'm the person with the, hey, you know what, let's collect coats for 300 kids at a low-income school by next week. Or let's decorate 5 complete Christmas trees with gifts and donate them to a charity. That's me. So now it's a few years later, and I was on my first adult vacation. My son was 4. We got to go on a cruise. It was great. And I came home from that vacation where we had celebrated my birthday, and there was a story in the paper that a 16-year-old girl in Henderson had given birth in her bathroom and drowned the baby in her toilet. Now, this wasn't out in the middle of nowhere. This wasn't in a rural community in some part of Nevada I hadn't been to. This was my own backyard. It was my own city. And she knew she was pregnant. She told her friends. She had taken a pregnancy test. And yet, she did this. And I thought, this has to stop. Somebody has to do something. That somebody was me. So I started doing more research, started learning more about safe haven laws, and found that there were laws in many of the states, but Nevada still didn't have one. So I kind of leaned on the experience that I had gotten in volunteering in other areas, and I had been in PTA, and I had learned about advocacy. So I thought, I'll just pick up the phone and I'll just start calling legislators and ask if they'll do this. Yeah, that's a crazy idea, by the way. Don't do that. And I just started going through the list. And I think I said something along the lines of, I really think that Nevada needs a safe haven law. Would Senator so-and-so be interested in sponsoring a bill like this? And I got through the list, and I got to Senator Rawson's office, and his secretary said, well, you know, there's a group of women that are already working on that law. Why don't you work with them? Here's the name and number of the person that you should call. And I thought, you know, they got this under control. I don't really need to do anything. So I just kind of kept going along, and it nagged at me. I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I took a deep breath and I called. And the woman said, yeah, as a matter of fact, we're having a meeting tomorrow. Why don't you join us and we can talk about it? Crap. I said yes. And here's the worst part. They were with the Junior League. You know what the Junior League is like, don't you? They're just a bunch of rich women that sit around and buy each other lunch, and I don't fit in with those people. I'm a working mom. I'm not rich by any stretch of the imagination. But I said I would go, so I did. I didn't even know what to wear. What do you wear to talk to the Junior League? So I go to the restaurant and I think, you know what? I'm just going to sit back and listen. They've got this under control. So I kind of introduced myself and I shrunk back into a corner and they started talking and they said, well, bill's already been drafted and we're going to go to Carson City and we're going to testify about it. We didn't really know what to say. Well, at that point, that little research that I had been doing turned into a 2-inch 3-ring binder. And so I said, I have everything you need right here. Now, this was a big step for me because when I talk about confession time, because I just feel the need to confess to all of you, confession number 2 is I am very intimidated by large groups of women. Now, not this group, but organized groups of women. It terrifies me. So this was huge for me to do this. So I gave them the binder, and they went to Carson City, and they testified. And during the time that the bill was being heard in the session that year, there were 2 babies that were found dead in dumpsters. And one of them was baby boy Atlantic, because he was found dead on Atlantic Street. Now, I'm an only child. I don't have extended family. I'd never been to a funeral before. And I went to this funeral. And I can remember standing in a packed funeral home with all of these people who didn't even know who this child was or where he came from, but felt the need to be there just like I did. And I looked in that coffin and I saw the most beautiful face, and I thought, what could you have been? Who could you have become? Why didn't you get that chance? So on May 21st of 2001, Governor Kenny Gwinn signed the Safe Haven Law, and it became law in Nevada. So I picked up the phone and I called the woman from Junior League and I said, the bill passed, what are we going to do now? And she said, well, nothing. That was the goal, to get the bill passed. I said, you can't pass something like this and not educate the public. You have to tell them what the law is and how it works. Otherwise, it's useless. Well, working in television, I had access to a lot of great people and a lot of equipment, and thanks to my bosses at the television station, within 10 days, we had written and produced a public service announcement that was airing all over southern Nevada. Shortly after that, I organized a group of providers and put together a task force so that we could educate the people who would be receiving babies what to do, and to make sure that they understood that the law did affect them. We even created these really cool tackle boxes that were shrink wrapped that had a pacifier and a diaper and the things that you would need if a baby was dropped off and you weren't expecting it. So after I did all of that, the women from Junior League said, well, you might as well join. So I did. And in 2003, I went to Carson City during the legislative session as their volunteer lobbyist. And we were lobbying on the issue of trying to keep siblings together in foster care. So we had held a reception at the governor's mansion so we could talk to legislators about our bill and why it was important. And while I was there, these two women walked up to me, and they had the most beautiful baby boy, just gorgeous. And they said, are you April? And I said, yes. And they said, we'd like you to meet our son. And I said, oh, okay. And he says, he was the first baby that was ever legally abandoned in the state of Nevada, and we adopted him. That's when I knew. That was the moment that I knew that I was doing this for the right reason, because I wanted to make a difference in someone's life. I didn't want anybody to know who I was or my name, but that was the moment. So life happens. 2 kids, life is busy, and I stayed with Junior League for about 5 years, and then I stepped away. And in the meantime, I started getting asked to run for office. Now, the first time I was asked, my kids were 8 and 10, and I said, no. Second and third time, I was asked to run for school board. I went, no. God bless you if you do, because that's a thankless job. And what I also found out was that on average, it takes women 7 asks before they'll consider running for office. Why? Because we have to have all our ducks in a row. We have to make sure that everybody else is taken care of before we can commit ourselves to something as big as running for office. So the 4th time I was asked, I finally said yes. I'm an easy learner. And I ran for office. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this story is because each one of you has that nagging thing inside of you. There's that thing that you've seen that you thought, somebody should do something about that. Well, what if the somebody is you? What if you're the person that's supposed to make a difference in someone else's life? It's a difficult concept to think about because we're all so busy. But we also know that we make time for what's important. Because trust me, if we didn't, Facebook wouldn't exist. So what is that nagging thing? What is that thing that you can't stop thinking about, that you find yourself clipping articles for? That's what I want you to think about. That's what I want you to take some time and sit down and figure out, what can I do that will make this problem go away? It's not easy, and it's not always fun, but I will tell you that it's one of the most rewarding things you will ever do in your life. Now, again, being the big idea person, I have not accomplished all of the things that I want to do in my life, but what I found is that the more people I tell about what I want to do, the more people that will join me and help make it happen. Or sometimes even just do it without me, which is great, because then I can think of other things to do. So in case you're looking for ideas, one is we need a steady funding source for Safe Haven, because Safe Haven waxes and wanes every time a baby is found. Second, there are no fully accessible playgrounds in Nevada. There is no place where able-bodied children and disabled children can play in the exact same spot. We need that. We need more community gardens. There's a great spot in Henderson where there are 3 schools and 5 apartment complexes in a food desert, all within walking distance of a plot of land that would be a great community garden. But you have your own ideas. So think about what you can do. Think about what's nagging you and what's important to you and how you can make that difference in someone's life. And you won't always have the opportunity to look into the eyes of the person whose life you've touched, but know that your deeds are written on their soul. And make sure that you bring other people along, because it's so much more fun to have people around you as you're going through this journey.